That is a picture of the man, Randy Elrod. And this is Worship Team Training, Brandon Dempsey. Great to see you guys. Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to all our Periscope friends. Say, what's up, Periscope? You're live on YouTube, both ways. Live YouTube and also Periscope. How do you like that? Love to have you. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining Brandon Dempsey, Worship Team Training. Today is September the 30th. Can you believe it? It is the day that Apple gives us El Capitan. Can I say that the Lord gave us El Capitan and we get to step into it, right? So, man, we got a lot of exciting things today. But, man, the greatest thing of all that's happened today, this man right here, Randy Elrod, that's going to be joining us. And he's not going to say anything yet because he's got much more to say in just a few minutes. So we want to say thank you also for checking us out here on YouTube. Also following us on Periscope. Say shout out to our Periscope guys right there. And we thank you guys because you're the reason why these things happen. Why we do the scopes, why we do the YouTube, why we're on Facebook, Twitter, everything else, Instagram, you Google it, you Google it, you know, all those social sites. It's because of what God is doing through you. It's not about anything else, but it's about what God is doing through you and who God is in your life and how you're leading other people and teams in worship. Amen? So let's continue to keep on going. Check us out. Wow, coming up later this month. You cannot miss it. We're going to have Chris Vache back with us. Chris from Canada. And this boy right here, Rich, knows way too much about him. So we're going to have a lot of fun having Chris on. And also, we have returning guest for the third time, Ross King. Awesome man of God, awesome heart, fantastic songwriter. Can't wait to have him. And also, we have a preacher coming from the Atlanta area by the man known as Larry W. Robinson. So that is going to be a trip. So Swift, you better buckle up your seatbelt, Bubba, wherever you are. All right, so let's get to it today. We are talking about how to deal with unhealthy churches, unhealthy people, unhealthy environments, all that stuff that none of us really like to talk about, but it is the very thing that we do need to talk about. So what I like to do is kind of transition us a little bit, because last week we talked about, not last week, 2 weeks ago, with this young man right here, Rich, we talked about the fact of replacing yourself in leadership. And what does that mean to replace yourself in order to bring up the next generation to lead ministry, but to lead others to Christ, worship, whatever it may be. So today we're taking that a step further, because as you lead in your churches and as you are bringing up the next generations, how do you do that when you're in the face of unhealthy church environments? Wow, what an epidemic. If I was Donald Trump, I would say, that is huge, but I'm not Donald Trump. So what I'm going to do is let's introduce our guest today. I know, I got a million of them, trust me, we'll be here all day. Randy Elrod, our special guest. He is the CEO and founder of Creative Conferences and the nonprofit Creative Community, Inc. He has a BA of music, so this guy is a music dude, so he knows where you're coming from. From Palm Beach Atlantic University. I mean, what a poor place to be, on Palm Beach. Come on, you kidding me? And for 30 years, with as creative arts director at the two of the largest mega churches in the world. And since 1998, I don't know if anyone else can remember that year. I do. He also founded 4 companies, and he sold them. He's worked with many diverse people, such as from Michael Hyatt to Vicky Beeching. The coolest project that he ever had to be involved with is Kayleen. And it's a 55-acre oasis in the Appalachian Mountains. So we're going to hear more about that and what he's doing there. He loves writing books. He loves cooking. He's a better cooker, a better chef than me. He also knows how to drink whiskey and rye. That is uncommon. And also savoring new wines. He actually does wine tasting classes. So I'm like, now I'm interested to see what else this guy can do. Okay, let's not stop there. I mean, the bio keeps on going. I'm not making this up, okay? He said he completed 25 marathons. He completed 25, and he looks like he's never aged a day. And he's also hunted in the wilderness of the Kodiak Islands and Alaska. He got half eaten by a bear. That actually turned out to be his tent and his raft, and now he's here today with us. So, without further, oh, and by the way, we need to know where we can follow Randy on for Twitter and also his website. But without further ado, let's say a big warm welcome to Randy Elrod. How are you today, Randy?
Hey, great, thank you. It's great to be with you, Brandon and Rich.
Hey, it's great to be with you, sir.
Yeah.
Can you tell our folks, all Periscope and also YouTube and the playbacks, where we can find you on Twitter and your website?
Yes, just Randy Elrod, RandyElrod, and every one of those places. Twitter is at Randy Elrod, YouTube.com/Randy Elrod, RandyElrod.com for my blog, Instagram, Periscope, you name it, Randy Elrod.
This guy's everywhere. I mean, you talk about one of the social kings and ministers. This is the guy. This is the guy. So great. It's awesome, man. Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
Rich, how are you, man?
I'm great because I'm with two gentlemen that I respect here, and Randy I've known for years, and I know that the listeners are going to get quite good wisdom from this gentleman. This Renaissance gentleman, let's say.
He is a Renaissance man. There's no doubt about it. No doubt.
A Renaissance redneck.
There we go. I forgot the redneck part. which is a must-read book, by the way, if he doesn't say it. Very few books tell the story. I don't think there's actually a book that tells a story of what it's like to be a music minister, worship leader. And this book that Randy wrote is a gift to I think the church, and especially those of us who've lived scenarios very similar. So, great job on that book.
And that book again is called
Renaissance Redneck and Megachurch Pulpit. Did I get it right?
Go, Rich.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I highly recommend it. It's to see one parallels to your story, and you'll understand why what Randy has to say today is good.
Say the book title one more time.
Thank you.
Renaissance Redneck and a Megachurch Pulpit.
Renaissance Redneck and a Megachurch Pulpit.
Yeah, you can get it anywhere fine books are sold.
He kind of looks like a redneck. I don't know. The striped shirt kind of throws me off a bit, but the ball cap, he's got the Jimmy Buffett thing going on. I like that.
Good Lord, I get that everywhere. That's what everybody told me in Franklin. I'm the Jimmy Buffett of Franklin.
There you go. Oh my God. Especially when he turns his head to the side, you can see the mullet. Oh wow, that's just great. No kidding. That's great. And Rich is coming to us from National Worship Leader Magazine. We're going to do a second one show today after this, right, Rich?
Are we? What time is that one?
Whenever you want. We're going to talk. I guess we're just going to chat about later. I guess amongst ourselves. So let's get right to it. Here we go. Talking about surviving unhealthy churches. Now, Periscope friends, I've been sharing that with you a little bit yesterday as far as my story, not everything of it, but we're going to hear from one of the pioneers of leading worship, a guy who's truly been here and with us, and he's been there so that we can learn from. So when we talk about in church ministry, it has its ups and downs. And when it comes to health, it not only does it affect the congregation and staff, but when things go awry in your staff setting, how do you deal with the ongoing spiritual and professional on that level? How do you deal in moving from negative to positive? So that's why we have Randy here today. So Randy, we're just going to hit you up with the first question. What is your idea of how many unhealthy churches there are versus healthy churches in America?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. And I love looking at it from a negative to a positive aspect because I'm an optimist, eternal optimist. No matter what kind of things I've gone through, it hasn't killed my optimism. So the glass, the cup, is half full that you're drinking.
But it is, right?
So here's my thoughts on that. I don't think it's a matter of how many unhealthy churches versus healthy churches. I think it's a matter of churches are living organisms, right? They're living. They're composed of living people. And so living organisms get sick. We all get sick from time to time. It's a part of life. It's a circle of life. So all churches go through cycles of good health and bad health. And so if that's true, it's encouraging because that means if you're in a bad health cycle, things are going to get better, right? They're going to get more positive because we'll get healthy. But in order to do that, it's important for the leadership to know that we need to go to the doctor, so to speak, right, to get well-trained help in order to heal. So that's kind of my thoughts on that, is that every church from time to time is going to be healthy, and from time to time is going to be unhealthy. And so we can talk about later, if we have time or if we even want to, about the churches that are with toxic leaders that tend to be eternally unhealthy. That's a whole different matter.
Wow.
It's hard to go from negative to positive in that situation. So I'm just looking at it from churches as a whole. Churches are living, they're going to get sick, and hopefully with wise leadership, they're going to be healthy.
Yeah. Awesome. Man, thanks, Randy. That was great. Intoxicated leaders?
Toxic.
No, toxic leaders. I'm sorry. What was I thinking? Rich, can you speak into that?
I think that's true, that you're going to find the cycles in a church. And I serve in a lot of new churches, and so they often tend to be unhealthy just because structures can't keep up with all the people and relationships. Currently, I'm at a church that's, I don't know, 70 years old or whatever, and there's some health to the fact that it's been around a while. So, and I've seen, basically, I can see what Randy's saying. And I think you have to be in a church long enough to really see some of the cycles. I don't know how many years, but it's not just a year-by-year thing.
Okay. Yeah, good. Here's something that, I mean, this is the loaded question, loaded gun here. So I'm just going to pull the trigger, okay? Randy, people in general, you already know this one, okay? People in general don't like to talk about the elephant in the room. When we talk about toxic leaders, toxic people, it's funny how, isn't it? It just takes one person to bring the whole ministry or church down. So how important is it for others to deal, or for the church to deal with the truth?
Yeah, this question makes me channel Jack Nicholson, right? You can't handle the truth.
Did you order the code red?
I've wanted to do that so many times in staff meeting, but I didn't.
What, the code red or the truth?
Code Black, right? That's a new show. One thing really hard to admit for us, especially in the church, is that unhealthy people cannot lead well. Unhealthy people, unhealthy leaders spread disease. Well, then that becomes a virus, and soon the whole church is suffering. And the way churches are wired, the senior leadership, the way most of the churches I worked with anyway, the senior leadership is very isolated and all-powerful. And so if he or she, if they're as stubborn as my dad, there's no way in hell they're going to a doctor. They're afraid. And fear in leadership is very, very debilitating. They would rather pretend not to be sick. That's the way my dad is. He's never been to a doctor in his life. And he would rather pretend not to be sick than to admit weakness. It's what we've been taught, not to admit weakness. And so I think that's the elephant in the room, right, is the fear and the inability to admit that we're all weak at times. We're all unhealthy at times. James Hollis, who is, by the way, in your wonderful city, Brandon, he's the head of the Jungian School of Psychology, and in Houston.
Wow.
And,
okay.
He's one of my favorite authors, and he says this. He says that nobody can claim the casual comfort of innocence, right? And I think that's very true. None of us are innocent, and none of us are healthy all the time. And so if we can put that elephant out of the room, that would be a really incredible thing.
What was his name again? Because the internet cut out for a second.
Yep.
Oh, the name of
the book?
No, the person.
Oh, James Hollis.
James Hollis.
Okay. Hollis. He's the head of the Jungian School of Psychology in Houston.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That's why that name rings a bell.
Yeah, he's been very influential. He has incredible teachings about health, and that quote is one of about 1 million great quotes that he gives.
Wow.
Did you get the quote?
Say it one more time for our viewers.
None of us can claim the casual comfort of innocence.
Yeah, that's good. Rich, what's firing off for you right now?
Well, I think it's an issue of power. I just had this really amazing quick conversation with a young PhD candidate um, talking about this very issue. Basically, he was sharing with me how, it's money's not the issue. Pastor's saying, I'll give up money. I'll give up all my book money. I'll give up all this. The issue is power. Will I be willing to give up any of my power to empower others? And that's where it becomes unhealthy, because if I'm too powerful, I'm not going to get help because I'll lose some of that, but the weakness. And I think that fear of losing power, or the addiction to power, like Randy said, all powerful, that really is, I think, one of the roots of our problems in a lot of these churches, is that there's no diffusion of power or shared power, because that quote really is profound. And if that's the case, then we just need a little more healthier system where a person doesn't have to fear those kind of things. But I'm an idealist like Randy too. I wish, I think that's possible.
Yeah, I'm really interested too, Randy, in what you had to say before the show. You were talking about some notable worship leaders who would come to you out of their experience, and they now have this need to confide and to talk about things. Can you elaborate a little bit on maybe what you've experienced in those kind of talks with other worship leaders?
Well, again, I go back to the word fear. There's a fear to be honest in our environments. I felt that in my environment because I was afraid for my job, my livelihood. I'm earning money for my kids and my family to survive, and I bought into the lie that was the only thing I could do. Is okay, I'll deal with this abuse, or I'll deal with this unhealthiness, and because I've got to take care of my family. And as I was looking in preparation for this show at a lot of the different sites, that's one of the common threads, is that we tend to be afraid.
Wow.
We're afraid of an outcome. We're afraid of losing our job. And so we tend to, it's almost like an abusive relationship, right, at the most unhealthy.
Very much.
We tend to put up with it. And that's what I hear from these guys is, oh my gosh, Randy, you're not in the ministry anymore, so you're safe. And so I can talk to you. And they can because I'm not in it anymore, and so I'm this safe place. And I'm thankful for that. Yeah. And as I was saying before, suffering sucks, but here's one of the positive outcomes of suffering.
What is that? Tell us. I'm writing this down because I love this. Tell us some more of the positive outcomes of suffering, because the reason why, and you know this too, I'm contacted by worship leaders also. I mean, just yesterday and this morning about guys that are suffering right now and they feel like they can't even breathe. What encouragement can you give them right now?
Oh, suffering, if the Bible is true, if it's true, then suffering leads to wisdom. But we tend to not really believe that, right? The leaders we choose at churches are the most affluent, the most successful, the most entrepreneurial, the most financially wealthy. The people that have suffered their entire life never tend to be in leadership positions. And so we miss out on the incredible wisdom that they have. And so I would say just hang on, One of the benefits of suffering for me is that I'm not so judgmental anymore. I had to call a bunch of guys and apologize because in my early ministry, I had not really suffered, and so I judged them for their failures. And I was wrong, because none of us, I go back to that quote, are innocent. And so I think that's one of the encouragements that, oh my gosh, this gives us a lot less judgment. And I would say that probably the biggest single thing, Brandon, is if I could say one resource, I would say to people that are hurting right now, go to Brene Brown and read her stuff about shame versus guilt. Shame versus guilt, because most of our churches and our religion is shame-based. And there's no way that shame is right. It is always wrong. So.
Okay. We have a question from my man Aaron here on Periscope. So Aaron, go ahead and ask your question, and I'll relay it to Randy. So as he's typing in, the shame versus guilt. That's huge. So in the background of our third question, and Aaron, as you're typing in your question right now, okay, here it is. How do you deal with people that are against you in worship? Like really, they don't believe in you. And he's meaning like the worship leading. We talked about that yesterday too, but what's your take on that, Randy?
So they don't believe in you. I guess I would need to know more about, they don't believe in your philosophy, in you as a moral person, in you as a leader. I guess, what would that mean?
Go ahead, Aaron, one more time. They don't believe in your leading, like leading worship, leadership. Let's just let that roll. What if it is? If they don't believe in you as a leader, your leadership, they just don't like the way that you lead worship. Go.
Just methodology.
We could talk about this all day. What is it? They don't like the way you lead worship. Rich, we did a show on this already. But Randy, we want to hear your take. What if they don't like the way you lead worship? How do you deal with that as a leader?
It's such a subjective thing, Rich.
I'm not rich. But we are in rich. No, come on, Randy. Come on, Randy.
Okay.
Go.
Okay, I thought you were directing it to Rich.
No, because they've already talked about it. They already talked about worship leaders around their church. And this guy who's typing in right now, they're talking about him behind his back around the church about how he doesn't lead well. They don't like the way he leads worship. What do you say to that?
Then I would start asking questions, right? The minute I get criticism, I start asking questions. I try to find the person and say, okay, what is it about my leadership that you don't like? And let's start at that point and find some common ground and see if we can be more objective about it, both of us. How does that is a good common ground to me. Is I want to know what you think. I want to, dialogue. I've said it so many times. And I have some friends in Europe, and they say Americans, we suck at debate. We suck at dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we tend to ignore in churches as leaders is the value of communication with the people that disagree with us. We can learn so much, and then hopefully they can too.
Right.
Amen.
Good. Yeah.
Amen to that.
Go ahead, Rich. You're nodding your head a lot.
Well, because I think that's the whole idea of empowering other people. And that's the root of the problem in churches is that it's a power grab. But for someone, and this is where someone like Randy was going to say, I want to share that power with you. I want to have a conversation. That's basically saying we're equals. We're brother and sister, or brother and brother, and we're going to talk through this. And that's really biblical too. But for some reason, again, I just go back to that toxic addiction to power, limits our ability to be free to talk. And I remember one time I changed an older woman's mind about worship. She wrote me a letter at 3 a.m. saying, I used to run out of the service. I'm going to go back in the service because even though we disagree, I'm a team player, and I appreciated that we got to talk. And well, her small group talked her out of it. One of the pastors was mad at me and turned that around against me because you can't have that. You can't. People can't be like that. It's not like I was trying to subvert anybody, but we had this incredible bonding that in an unhealthy system actually could blow up.
Yeah. Man. Anything else on that, Randy?
Oh, open dialogue is just the bomb. But we just don't do it as Americans. It's not just the church.
Mm-hmm.
It's when somebody disagrees with us, we take it personally instead of taking it as an opportunity to grow.
Yeah. Our opportunities to grow, like what I have found, is that we learn, like in my experience, we learn more about the Lord Himself through our suffering. I think that's when you read the Old Testament and the epistles, that's all it's about. It's about learning who God is through the suffering. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Yes. I think it is. I'll address it more in this third question because I think there's another nuance to it.
Okay. Well then, let's go ahead to the third question now because he's wanting to go. All right. So the third question is, all right. So this is a good question for everybody because everybody's wanting to know. This is about how do we deal with the unhealthiness of church in an unhealthy church environment. So Randy, because you asked, what are some ways you encourage worship leaders and ministers to stay healthy?
Well, you just such a great lead-in, Brandon.
Thank you.
You know, you're talking about God and getting to know God through suffering. So the greatest commandment, right?
Yep.
Love God with all your heart. I think suffering leads us to the great commandment. We love God with all our heart. Then what does Jesus say? He says, love others as yourself. And to me, that's the nuance that we miss a lot. The prerequisite to loving and caring for others is loving ourselves. And that's countercultural to Christianity, self-care. And to me, one of the ways to stay healthy is self-care. To love others as you love yourself, loving yourself. During the darkest time of my life, Charlie Lowell, who's in the group Jars of Clay, he's just one of my buds. And we were together, and I was just saying, man, this suffering sucks. And he just said words that I will never forget as long as I live. He said, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And until we love properly take others. So self-care is the most selfless thing we can do, but for some reason we kind of think it's wrong, right, to take care of ourselves. And I say a lot, we've sacrificed our souls at the altar of self-denial. If we don't take care of ourselves, no one else will. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. That's why I've dedicated this whole second part of my life to encouraging others that are wounded and weary. Hopefully I can help them understand the value of taking care of themselves. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Some of the practical things that I share with folks from a physiological standpoint would be, exercise, rest, and diet. Because if any of those are out of whack, it just spikes up the anxiety. It spikes up unnecessary emotions because we're out of sync. But there's a lot of spiritual things that get out of sync as well. Can you talk about some of those spiritual things that get out of sync?
Yeah, I think Hybels, no matter what you think about him, he did one of the greatest sermons to me. He did this sermon about gauges of life, that we have three main gauges in our life, just like a dashboard, right? We've got the physical, what you're alluding to, Brandon,
right?
The spiritual and the emotional. And so when we take a glance, when we get in the car, we look and say, okay, I've got enough fuel, it's not running hot, everything looks cool. It's the same way we need to assess ourselves on a daily basis, right? How does our dashboard look? How does our spiritual dashboard look? How does our emotional dashboard? How does our physical? And attending to those, to me, one of the most important things, and that's why Colleen is in existence, right? Solitude, rest. Because when my whole life crashed around me, and I'm telling you, man, I didn't know what to do. I was just like spinning. My therapist said, you need to get away, because if you can think objectively for a bit and rest, you're going to heal. And that was the best advice I'd ever gotten. I just took off to Colorado and just had some time to think. And that's when God speaks to you, right? You know where God speaks to you the most. Like
right.
For me, it's nature, it's
right.
being out and alone, however that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks for that, Randy. And we're going to go over a little bit, so I hope that's okay with everybody. You guys good? Randy, you good?
That's good for me because no one showed up for my blogging class that starts right now.
Oh, crap. You got to go right now?
Well, no one showed up for it, so it looks like I'm actually in good shape. It happens from time to time. Blogging,
So real quick, Rich, you came out of also, just like the rest of us, you came out of unhealthy environments also. How did you deal with that? Randy talked about his escape. What was yours?
Oh my goodness, how to
And I mean in a
survive.
healthy way of escape too. I don't mean unhealthy.
A healthy way to escape from it?
A healthy, yeah.
Well, I mean, having a tribe of people that you can confide in, that was one of the reasons I spent a lot of years going to the Recreate conference that Randy puts on, to just having people you can talk with honestly about what you're going through, and have also relationships that wisdom, having a group of people that to just help you walk through that, because you have to leave at times.
Yeah.
Is that a good answer?
Yeah, no, I mean it is. But that's what I love you and how you share your story in so many ways to leaders, because all of us in this thing that we call ministry we feel like we're the only ones going through it. We feel isolated. We feel there's no one else who understands. And Randy, from your experience, how true is that, and how do you help others that say that to themselves?
It's so true, Brandon. We feel like we're the only ones, but all of us are wounded and weary, right? We're all wounded. We're all weary. That's why the foundations of Recreate, Rich was talking about, the two foundations that we've kept through 16 years is encouragement and refreshment. Encouragement and refreshment. We can't get enough of that, because we're, as ministers, every day, we're ministering to the wounded and the weary. And so after a while of ministering and giving out and giving out and giving out, there has to be time for, as you were talking about, Brandon, spiritual replenishment. There has to be emotional replenishment and physical replenishment. And so we're all that way. We're all human. If Jesus was telling the truth in the Bible, then he was the only one that was perfect. All the rest of us, we have hang-ups. We have foibles. So we're all that way. We're all in it together.
Yeah, I love that. It's like what you and I were talking last night on the phone. I didn't mention this, but Monty Kelso had said this a long, long time ago, that we do so much pouring out into others. The question is, who's pouring into you?
Yep.
So,
profound.
Yes. So, and to camp on that, I just like to say that this is the reason why worship teams, those of you on Periscope, YouTube, this is why we do our mentoring program. worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring. You can see all the list of awesome mentors that we have: Tim Timmons, Tony Guerrero, and Rich and I are going to be putting on some webinars for that as well. And if you, John Chisholm, you want to study with one of us, I mean, that's what it's about. It's about walking alongside you in your journey. And that's something that, Randy, you've really brought the show today and made that happen. So thank you very much for sharing your heart and spending your time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for taking time to spend on this subject. It's a big deal.
I had just one last question, and one last question that came through. Scotty Bowell says, "Yo, Randy."
Scotty.
What's up, Scotty? He saw your name, man. He wanted to. All right, big shout out. He gave you a lot of hearts for that. Thanks, Randy. On the topic of taking care of yourself, I have another question from a worship leader. See, we're just going on, man. I know he's awesome, isn't he, Scotty? One question from Twitter. On the topic of taking care of yourself, when should you take time off for the year? 2, 3, 4 times off a year? What's your recommendation?
I think we all have different rhythms. You know, like one of the mega churches, we were doing 7 services a week, 90 hours we were working a week. So, and there's these big series and places where there wasn't any chance to take off except in the summer. And so I just had to put everything together in the summer and do it, no matter, even though I needed it more often, that's the only chance I got. So whenever you can grab it, baby, grab it. And if you start feeling, it's that acronym HALT, right? HALT. If you're hungry, alone, lonely, or tired, if you're feeling like that, if there's some fear, then that means it's time to get away.
Okay. You gotta. I remember learning that.
Yep.
That is so powerful.
It's so true.
Will you please Spell out that whole acronym one more time.
Yes, HALT, halt. When you know it's time to halt or get away is when you're either hungry, alone, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired.
Hold on. Hungry, angry,
Lonely, and tired. And the hungry there, I take that to mean a soulish hunger,
yeah,
not so much a physical hunger. You know, there's something deeper to that hunger that you're feeling, whatever that is. If you're trying to fill it with Ashley Madison, or if you're trying to fill it with drugs or alcohol,
yeah.
that hunger. So if you're feeling hunger like that, if you're angry too much, we know when, okay, there's a difference between a response for somebody cutting us off on the highway and us just getting angry about something that's silly. And then lonely, when we're feeling lonely, when we're feeling like we are the only one that's going through something, and when we're tired, all of those are signals that we need to get away, and we need to watch those.
Wow.
That's and you brought another thing to mind that I was just thinking of looking at my notes here. Response versus react.
Yes.
Tell us the difference, please.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Brandon, I could talk about that all day. The reactions that we have are such a key to who we are and our strengths. We react the most vigorously and the most, in many times, overreact to when our strengths are violated. That's a huge thing to me. And so reactions are not bad. I was taught that reaction is bad, but I think that reactions are good. We just need to look and say, okay, why did I react that way? There's a strength that was violated. So how can I handle that and look at that and maybe see where I can help that in the workplace, okay? Because if there's a reaction all the time, just constant reaction, that means one of your core strengths, and we've all been taught by Marcus Buckingham and the Gallup organization, right, to work to our strengths. Well, if one of our core strengths is being violated day after day after day, then we need to look at that reaction and really take an objective look at it. So I think that is an important thing.
Wow. Rich, how are you with time and everything?
Oh, I'm good actually, and I just love how Randy says strength.
Yeah.
It's kind of yeah. It's great. It's like people like listening to like the British accent. Well, this is one of those for me. It's awesome. It's authentic right there in the Appalachians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody right now is putting out hashtag halt. Right now, it's happening. Hashtag halt. And Scotty just called you, Rich, Master Stash.
Oh, well, that's nice.
I know it's a lot nicer than me calling him Walter White.
I think that rest thing is so important. I mean, it's. I remember one year, Randy, I decided not to take all my vacation. I took half of it, and I stayed, let my family go, and I, had to hire some people. This was when I was at a mega church, and it was the worst decision I've made in my entire life, almost, because it just took me a long time to recover from the rest that I should have had.
Yeah.
And I thought, what could have been different in just my ability to function? But I was trying to, run the machine, and
yeah, we talk ourselves out of it. We can't afford it. We don't have time to do it, and that's one of the reasons at Colleen we're going to make it according to what you can pay. Because I did talk myself out of it a lot because I didn't have the money to get away at a nice place, and so going, you know what? That's one thing, Colleen. The blessings that I have experienced, I get to take that and go, okay, if you can't afford it, I don't care. You're going to come. You may help me build my stone wall back or something for an hour or two, but you're going to be able to come. And we can't talk ourselves out of it. We have to go. It's our soul we're talking about, right? It's the emotional part, the spiritual part, the physical part of us. And most of the decisions, Brandon, Rich, most of the decisions I've made in solitude and rest, when I really had deep rest or solitude and had a beautiful place to stay, those are some of the decisions that have formed my life for the rest of my life.
Nobody's here?
All right, so 2 weekends included. Need more? Right. HALT, Mika, you asked a question. Mika asked a question. The acronym for HALT was hungry, angry,
lonely, tired.
and tired. Right. So what if we're not full-time in ministry, and how can we deal with everyday things, and how did you guys deal with it?
I've been full-time since I was 4. I can't even imagine. My dad was always.
He had, like, when he was born, he had HALT imprinted on his forehead.
It's so true.
With a hashtag.
I went to church 8 days before I was born. 8 months before I was born.
That's awesome.
My dad was bivocational.
Yeah.
And I wish he were here to speak to that, because he worked a full-time job and pastored a church his entire life for 70 years. So it's a difficult thing.
Wow. It's too much. So what's the I mean, we can go all day long. The Periscope people are loving it. I don't know what everybody else is thinking on YouTube and everything, but Randy, tell us what's the one thing? I mean, we talked about a lot, so, and this is good, but what's the one thing that what's the one thing that you keep coming back to?
Right now?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of it.
Yeah. I've got a friend who's an avid reader, and he and I get together once a month, and we talk about the books that have meant the most to us. And he's pretty well known, Michael Hyatt. He's got a big blog, and he's a business guy. He's been a longtime friend, and we've been able to renew our friendship the last 4 months.
Can you tell everybody who Michael Hyatt is?
He was, for a long time, he was the CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishing.
Right.
And now he has one of the biggest business blogs, and he just wrote a best-selling book for New York Times. He's just a fascinating guy, but I know him more as just like a friend, buddy. We were neighbors, and we both love whiskey. We both love scotch, but we both love to read. And so we get together once a month now and just talk about books and life, and not business. We don't talk about business. And he gave me a gift. And so, Brandon, here's the answer to this, because it's just been something that's been hitting me. He gave me a gift when we last met a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I don't even know why I'm giving you this book, because you do this, but I'm giving it to you anyway. And it was called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I think is how you say his name, Mckeown. And his premise of this book, which has gripped me, and it's why I moved out to Killeen, it's why we're living in an RV in a one-room cabin right now, is that this premise, less is better.
Wow.
He said it's not just less is more, but less is better. And I would say that in answer to that question about the bivocational guy or girl, they're working a job and working less is better. We tend to let everybody else make our choices for us, but we have to take control and make our choices for ourselves. And when you're doing bivocational work, good Lord, it's like you're doing 2 full-time jobs instead of a part-time job and a full-time job. And so you have to take control of your choices, and you have to say, how do I know when to say no? When to say no. And that's the premise of this book, Essentialism. It's a powerful book. Less is better.
Wow.
Focus in on the things that you know you cannot not do. Those are the things that you focus on. And everything else, you have to let it go.
So focus on the things that
you cannot not do.
You cannot not do. Does everybody get that?
I mean, it's your passion, right? It's the thing that you're built for. It's why you were created. What is that one thing you were created for? If I could say that, Brandon, that's the thing. I didn't know what I was created for. I didn't. If you want to take all the movie critics and use the hoity-toity word existentialism, what's my existential angst? What am I created for? And when it all boiled down for me, I was not created to be a worship leader. I was not created to be a minister. I was not created even to be a father or a husband. I was created by God or the gods to be an encourager.
Right.
To be an encourager. I led worship because I'm an encourager. I was a father because I'm an encourager. I'm a husband because I'm an encourager. I'm a minister because I'm an encourager. Everything that I was built for in my DNA. So that's the one thing I cannot do. I have to encourage. So what is that for you? You know, that less is better. What's that focus of your life? Why are you here? Why are you here?
Wow. Rich, is your head blown off yet?
Bam! I have to say, even
Jet.com.
I'm like, I just
it's
feel like a volcano.
It's a pretty big head too to explode. It reminds me of what one of the Recreate speakers, Charles Lee, said to us. He goes, "How much is enough?" You know, like you can decide a point. You know, you don't have to because of this reason. And I think it's just profound. And I've been there. We moved to the city in an apartment because we, didn't like the suburban life in a sense, what it was doing to us, and it's been an interesting journey. But we had to basically get rid of. We have a lot less now, for a family of 4, and it's a good thing.
Wow.
It sucks, but it's a good thing. It does. Less is better.
Yeah, I love that. Well, even Proverbs says, what I love about Proverbs speaks into that, saying that the ending is always better than the beginning.
Yeah.
How have you seen that in your life, Randy?
The whole last chapter of my Renaissance Redneck is about that. the ending, the beginning, which is which, and sometimes the ending is the beginning, right? It's the ending that you think is the end of your life is actually the beginning. And so there's a lot to be said about that. That's a powerful thought, that when I come to the end of all I am, when I went through a very difficult divorce 6 years after I left the ministry to start my nonprofit, and I literally got to walk away from 50 years of success with one box and my Jeep Wrangler. And that was the worst thing I thought that could have ever happened to me at that time 5 years ago. But it was actually, it seemed like the ending of my life. But what it was a beginning, because less is better. And when you get rid of all the stuff, all of a sudden you have to focus on who you are, what you're created to be. And so, that's a big subject.
That just hit me, because I remember what we learned through counseling. And by the way, I would just say that it's only the normal people who get help, right, Randy?
It's so true.
Okay.
So
true. I remember what you just said. You leave ministry, and it feels like the worst thing. Like you don't know what to do. It's kind of like like my wife and I wanted to get help from the very beginning when we first got married, because we didn't want to wake up with the kids being gone. They're grown out of the house, and then we look at each other, we wake up to each other and say, who is this person? It's that same kind of thing of, what do I do now? And if you don't spend that time investing in what God's given you in your spiritual, personal health, then when it's gone, and what do you have left?
Yeah, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it.
That's exactly right.
I love that, because one of the things I often tell myself, but I also tell our younger leaders, is this: that no one is going to stay up at night thinking and worrying about you. They might be worried about you not giving them something, but they're not going to be worrying about these things, about who you are, what drives you, your future, how are you going to make it, and that is something you have to own.
Yeah.
And they always quote a verse. It's like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Rich. So you can do it all. And I retort back rhetorically now through these younger leaders and say, well, does that mean jumping off a bridge? I don't think so, and not with our life. It's too important. You are too important out there, and you are more than your role as a worship leader. You're more than what people think of you and what you give them at the moment. And it's the long haul that matters. And you got to have something left. And that's how you could give people more. Really.
I love that too. That reminds me of a good friend of mine that said, how much gas is in your tank, and learning how to keep your tank full without running on empty.
Yep. Sounds like an Eagles song.
Well, was it? Yeah, running on empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, running. Okay, and then also, Drew Brown said, "You encourage so many, Elrod." I think he meant Gandalf. Doesn't he? He's got the he's like the Gandalf of our era, right?
You got to be careful about listening to those Canadians.
Yeah, they have a lot of sarcasm, just so you know, Brandon. They're gifted at sarcasm.
Awesome, Drew. That is so funny. Man, we went like major long, but what's so funny is that we're getting more and more people on Periscope, and some that are just seeing it for the first time. And so, if you're having to watch the playback on this, thanks for that, guys. And those of you on YouTube, I mean, gosh, I think this is this has to be one of the most funnest hangouts that we've done. And I'm so sorry that we couldn't have Tony and Timmons and Stephanie and Swift today, because I know, number one, Tony would jump all over this in a handbasket. Timmons probably would be drinking whiskey. Stephanie would probably be in tears. And Swift would probably just be hiding under the desk somewhere. But no, these guys would be all over it. Gosh. And so, anyway, well, we have to bring this to a close. I hate to do this, but how about we continue on Periscope? So that's the benefit. If you're following us on Periscope, hey, we're always here, right? You're on YouTube, well, you get the playback, but it's still great. Don't get me wrong, but we are so thankful that you guys joined us today. If you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, you guys rock. And most importantly, we want to say special thanks to Randy being with us today. Randy, thank you so much, man.
Yes, thank you, Randy.
Thanks. My pleasure. Pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And so we'll continue this discussion. Rich, as always, brother, thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet.
Yep. And we're going to go ahead and sign off now here on YouTube, and we'll continue this on Periscope. So if you haven't followed us yet on Periscope and you're watching us through YouTube, go to your app device and go to your app or Android store and download Periscope, and then you will find Periscope, and then follow Worship Team Training, and also go back and check out worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring for mentoring you and helping you in your journey, and also /workshops, where we come to your church and we do pretty much the same thing. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. Randy, again, it was a pleasure.
Thanks. May your tribe increase, Brandon, and you, Rich. May your tribe increase.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Randy, you
Thanks.
too. We're not signing off. Yes, don't go anywhere. Rich, thanks, Bubba.
You bet.
And we're coming back again. So you guys, thanks so much for joining us today on the Worship Team Training Hangout. May God's blessings flow to you and your worship team. We'll see you back soon. Bye.